My father's heart stopped at 4:17 on a Wednesday afternoon. By 8:30 that same evening, his wife had changed the locks on the front door. She was standing in the hallway when I came downstairs with my overnight bag, and she said the sentence she must have been rehearsing since the hospital called. "This is my house now. Pack your things and go." I had a duffel bag, a laptop, and a set of keys to a building she did not know existed. I zipped the bag and walked past her without a word. She had no idea what she had just done. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where the quiet ones always have the last word. If you are new here, subscribe and hit the bell so you do not miss what happens next. Trust me, you are going to want to stay for this one. The Wednesday before my father died, I drove 40 minutes to his house for dinner, the way I did every week. Linda had made pot roast. She always made pot roast on Wednesdays, and she always set 3 places at the table. Mine was never one of them. I did not say anything about it anymore. I had stopped saying anything about it 6 years ago. I would come in through the side door, find my plate in the cabinet, set it at the corner of the table where the placemat was a little shorter than the others, and eat whatever Linda had cooked. The routine was so familiar that it no longer required thought. My father was sitting at his usual chair when I walked in. He looked smaller than I remembered. His skin had the color of old newspaper, and his hands shook when he picked up his fork. He had been losing weight for months, and Linda kept saying it was his appetite. But I had pulled his medical records through the hospital portal. I knew it was his heart. Cora was scrolling through her phone across from him, her chair pushed back from the table, one knee up. She was 24 and still living at home, which Linda described as smart, and which I described as nothing, because it was not my business. My father asked me a question halfway through the meal. He set his fork down and said, "Did you get that building file sorted out?" Linda cut him off before I could answer. "Douglas, not at dinner. We were talking about the remodel." He looked at me. I looked at him. He picked up his fork again. After dinner, I washed the dishes. I always wash the dishes. On the counter beside the sink there was a stack of mail. The electric bill, an insurance statement, and a letter from a law firm addressed to Douglas Irving. The envelope was unopened. Linda swept the entire stack into a drawer before I could read the return address. "Just junk," she said. I dried my hands on the towel and drove home. The onion smell from the cast-iron skillet stayed on my coat the entire drive back. I rolled the window down at the highway merge and let the cold air pull it out. That was the last Wednesday I ate in that house. My mother died when I was 10. Her name was Helen, and she had brown hair and a quiet laugh, and a way of folding laundry that made it look like she was thinking about something else entirely. I remember the laundry more than I remember the funeral. After she was gone, my father did not know what to do with a 10-year-old girl who cried in the bathtub every night. He was not built for conversations about feelings. He was built for spreadsheets and assessments, and the particular kind of silence that men from small towns carry around like a second coat. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He taught me math. Every Saturday morning, he drove me around in his old truck, the kind with cloth seats that smelled like leather even though they were not leather. And we looked at houses. Not to buy, just to look. He would pull up in front of a property with a for sale sign and say, "What do you think this one's worth?" I would guess. He would correct me. Then he would explain why. Square footage, lot size, comparable sales, interest rates, the way a north-facing kitchen lost value in winter markets. I did not understand half of it, but I understood that he was talking to me, and that was enough. By the time I was 12, I could read a mortgage statement faster than most adults. I could estimate property tax from a listing photo. I could tell you whether a house was overpriced by the way the agent described the neighborhood. "Money does not fix everything," my father said one Saturday, idling in front of a 2-story colonial with a cracked driveway. "But it fixes a lot of things that people pretend have nothing to do with money." That same year, he married Linda. She came into the house with a 2-year-old daughter named Cora and a smile that covered every room like fresh paint. She rearranged the kitchen. She bought new curtains. She cooked pot roast on Wednesdays and banana bread on Sundays, and she called my father honey in a voice that made it sound like she had been practicing. I wanted to like her. I tried, but within 6 months, my bedroom had been repainted pink and renamed Cora's playroom. And I was sleeping in the smallest room in the house, the one next to the garage that smelled like motor oil and cold concrete. My father said, "Linda had a hard time before. Be patient." I was 12. I was patient. Linda was not a bad person the way people in movies are bad. She did not yell or throw things or lock me in a closet. She was worse than that. She was thorough. Within 2 years of moving in, she had reorganized every room in the house to center around Cora. The family photos on the mantel shifted. First, a few of Helen were moved to the hallway, then to the upstairs landing, then to a box in the attic labeled Old Frames. Linda replaced them with studio portraits of herself, Douglas, and Cora. In one of them, taken at a department store photo booth, all three of them wore matching navy sweaters. I was not in the photo. I had not been invited to the session. She controlled the money, too. Not in a dramatic way. She kept a spreadsheet on the family desktop. Every grocery run, every gas receipt, every subscription. She tracked it and presented it to my father on the first of each month. She called it our family budget review. It was the only meeting I was never invited to attend. When I asked my father about it, he said Linda had been through financial hardship in her first marriage. Her ex-husband had left her with nothing. No savings, no car, no credit history. The fear of that happening again drove her to control every dollar that entered the house. I understood the logic. I even felt sympathy for it, for a while. But sympathy has a shelf life when the person receiving it uses it to justify pushing you further and further from the center of your own family. By the time I was 14, my room was the smallest in the house, and my name was the one Linda forgot to write on the Christmas cards. She sent them every December, the Irving family on the front, a photo of the three of them on the back. When our neighbor, Mr. Hamblin, asked why I was not in the picture, Linda laughed and said, "Oh, Paige is so busy with school. She never has time for photos." I was standing right there. I was not busy. I had been home all afternoon. My father heard the exchange. He looked at me across the kitchen counter, and for a moment I thought he was going to say something. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He picked up his coffee and walked to the garage. That was the year I stopped expecting anyone to fix it for me. The summer I turned 16, my father drove me to his office on a Saturday morning. He closed the door, sat me down across from his desk, and opened a manila folder with my name on it. "I started this for you 2 years ago," he said. $5,000 in an index fund. It is in your name." I looked at the statement. The balance had grown to $6,200. I did not understand compound interest yet. Not really, but I understood the weight of what he was doing. He was building something for me that Linda could not reach. "Do not mention this to Linda," he said. He held up his hand before I could respond. "Not because it is a secret. Because she will worry. She worries about everything that she cannot track on her spreadsheet." He taught me how to read the quarterly reports. He showed me how to check the fund's performance against the index. He handed me a pocket calculator, a cheap one, the kind with a cracked plastic case and buttons that stuck, and said, "Keep this. Do your own math. Always." I kept it. I still have it. Over the next 2 years, my father added to the fund when he could. Not large amounts. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. He also started talking to me about a building he owned a partial stake in, a commercial property downtown, 6 floors, mostly office space. He had bought in when the neighborhood was rough and the price was low. "Someday this will be yours," he said, the way other fathers might say, "Someday this truck will be yours." I nodded. I did not ask questions. I had learned by then that when my father gave me something, the best thing I could do was be quiet and hold on to it. The desk lamp hummed. The calculator clicked under my thumb. Outside, through the office window, I could hear a lawnmower running 2 houses down and the low static of the AM radio my father always kept tuned to the market station. 6 years later, I graduated summa cum laude in forensic accounting. The fund my father started with $5,000 had grown to $62,000. And the building downtown, the one he said would someday be mine, was already in my name. He had transferred the first shares on my 18th birthday. I did not tell anyone. There was nothing to tell. It was just math. I left for college at 18 and did not come back. Not in the way people leave dramatically. No slamming doors, no tearful goodbyes, no arguments in the driveway. I just packed 2 suitcases, loaded them into the used sedan my father had helped me buy, and drove east to a university 4 hours away. Linda waved from the kitchen window. Cora, who was 8 at the time, did not look up from the television. I rented an apartment near campus, a studio with one window that faced a parking lot, a radiator that clanged at night, and a coffee maker I bought at a thrift store for $7. The coffee was terrible. I drank it every morning and felt, for the first time in 6 years, like I could breathe. My father and I talked every Sunday. He would call at 9 in the morning, before Linda was up, and we would spend 20 minutes going over the fund, the building shares, the market. He never asked about my classes. I never asked about Linda. It was our language, numbers instead of feelings, returns instead of apologies. And it worked. Each time I drove back to visit, something in the house had changed. The first year, my bedroom had been converted into a yoga studio. A roll-out mat on the floor, incense on the windowsill, a speaker mounted on the wall that played ocean sounds. The second year, the garage had been remodeled into a craft room for Cora. The third year, even the hallway photos had been updated. There was not a single picture of me visible on the first floor of the house I grew up in. Linda never asked what I did for a living. She never asked how much I earned. She assumed, I could see it in the way she looked at my coat, my car, my shoes, that I was getting by, nothing more. The idea that I might be doing well did not occur to her, because in her mind, I had always been the one who did not matter. Meanwhile, my father continued transferring shares of the commercial building into my name. By the time I was 28, I owned it entirely. The property had appreciated in ways that even he had not predicted. The neighborhood had gentrified. The tenants were paying market-rate leases. The building was worth more than every house on our street combined. Linda remodeled my old bedroom into a yoga studio the same month I signed my first lease. I did not mention it. Neither did she. My father was diagnosed with severe cardiomyopathy the spring I turned 32. The doctors said it could be managed. They said it would require medication, monitoring, and rest. They did not say it would require Linda's permission to visit. But that is what happened. The first time I called to arrange a visit, Linda picked up the house phone and said, "He is resting." The doctor said no stress. The second time she said, "Douglas does not want visitors right now. I am handling everything." The third time I drove to the house without calling. Linda met me at the door and said, "Paige, I know you are worried, but your father needs calm. You showing up unannounced is not calm." She closed the door. I stood on the porch for 2 minutes, then walked back to my car. I called my Aunt Maggie that night. Maggie was my father's younger sister, 70 years old, sharp as a tax audit, and the only person in the family who had never been charmed by Linda's pot roast. Maggie had always seen through her. She just never said it out loud, because Douglas had not asked. "Linda has been telling the family you are too busy with work to visit," Maggie said. "She told the Hamiltons at church that you had not called in weeks." "I have called 14 times in the last month," I said. "I know you have. I also know she got Douglas to sign a financial power of attorney last Tuesday. She is on his bank accounts now." I sat in my apartment, phone in one hand, and felt the floor shift. Not because of the money. My assets were separate, untouchable. Because I recognized the pattern. Linda was not just managing Douglas's care. She was managing access. She was controlling who saw him, what they heard, and what they believed. She was building a wall, and my father was too sick to see it. 3 weeks later, my father had his second stroke. Linda called the family, Maggie, the cousins, the neighbors, the church group. She organized rides, meal deliveries, hospital rotations. She did not call me. I found out from a hospital nurse who recognized my last name in the system and called the emergency contact number on file. My cell phone, which my father had listed years ago before Linda had the chance to change it. He died on a Wednesday. Of course it was a Wednesday. The hospital called me at 4:21 in the afternoon. A nurse named Deborah, calm and practiced, told me that Douglas Irving had suffered a third cardiac event and had not survived. She said it with the kind of steady voice that meant she had done this many times before. She asked if I needed a moment. I said no. I said thank you. I said I would be there by tonight. I drove 3 hours in the dark. I did not turn on the radio. I did not cry. I thought about the last time I had seen my father, 6 weeks earlier, through the kitchen window as Linda walked me back to my car. He had been sitting at the table looking out at me, and he had raised one hand, not a wave, just a lift of the palm, and held it there until I pulled out of the driveway. I had not been allowed inside that day. When I arrived at the house, there were cars in the driveway, neighbors, a few cousins. The porch light was on, and through the front window I could see Linda in the kitchen, arranging white chrysanthemums in a glass vase. She was wearing a black blouse and her hair was pinned up. She looked like a woman who had been expecting this for a long time. I went in through the side door, my old way in. Upstairs, the yoga studio, my former bedroom, still had the mat rolled out and the incense burner on the windowsill. I set my duffel bag on the mat and sat on the floor. Linda appeared in the doorway within 5 minutes. She stood with both hands on the frame, blocking the hall light. "You are not sleeping here," she said. "This is my house now. Your father would have wanted it that way." I looked at the mat, at the incense, at the speaker on the wall. None of this had been mine for a very long time. "Okay," I said. I picked up my bag, walked downstairs, and passed Cora on the staircase. She was standing 3 steps up, holding her phone against her chest. She did not speak. She looked at me the way you look at someone leaving a building you know they are not coming back to. I drove to a motel 4 miles down the highway. I sat in the car for 20 minutes before I went inside. The key to the building downtown was in my coat pocket. I could feel its edge through the lining. I could have told her. Right there in that hallway, I could have said that I owned a building worth more than every house on that street combined. But some truths are worth more when they arrive on schedule. The funeral was held at a small church on Elm Street, the one with the stained glass window of a shepherd that had been cracked since 1987 and never repaired. My father had attended services there every Easter and every Christmas, and Linda had made sure the program listed her as beloved wife in the second line beneath his name. I arrived early. Linda and Cora were already seated in the front row, centered, shoulders touching. Linda wore a black dress with pearl earrings. Cora wore a new black skirt I had never seen before. They looked like they had coordinated the night before, which they probably had. There were 3 chairs in the family row. 3. I sat in the 3rd row, between a woman I did not recognize and an empty space. The seat creaked. The lilies on the altar smelled like a hospital waiting room. Maggie arrived 5 minutes before the service. She walked straight past the front row, past Linda's pearl earrings and Cora's new skirt, and sat down beside me. She took my hand and held it on her knee without a word. Then she leaned over and whispered, "Douglas prepared everything. Trust me." I nodded. I did not ask what she meant. I could feel the shape of it coming, the way you feel weather changing before the sky changes color. The pastor spoke. 2 neighbors gave short eulogies. One of them called my father a quiet man who showed love through actions, not words. I almost smiled at that. Afterward, in the church parking lot, a neighbor named Mr. Embry approached me. He was holding a paper cup of coffee from the fellowship hall, and he looked confused. "Paige, why were you not sitting with the family?" "There were only 3 chairs," I said. He blinked. He looked at Linda, who was accepting condolences near the hearse with one hand pressed to her collarbone, and he looked back at me, and he said nothing else. Linda made an announcement before the cars pulled away. She stood on the church steps in her black dress, steadied by Cora's arm, and addressed the group. "Douglas was very clear," she said. "The house is our family home. Cora and I will be staying there, as he always intended." She did not look at me when she said it. She did not need to. What she did not announce was the meeting with the estate attorney, scheduled for the following Thursday. Linda started her inventory the morning after the funeral. She began with the house. She called a real estate appraiser, a man named Garfield who wore square glasses and carried a clipboard. He walked through every room, measured the kitchen, opened the attic hatch, and tapped the basement walls with his knuckles. He told Linda the house was worth approximately $380,000. Linda wrote the number on the back of an envelope and underlined it twice. Next, she went to the bank. She presented Douglas's death certificate and requested a summary of all accounts. The teller pulled up the joint savings account, $140,000. Linda frowned. Douglas had earned a good salary for 30 years. Where was the rest? She asked the teller to check for additional accounts. Individual accounts, investment accounts, anything under the name Douglas Irving. The teller typed, scrolled, and shook her head. "That is the only account we have on file for this name at this branch." Linda drove home and sat at the kitchen table. Cora came in and poured herself a glass of orange juice. "Did you find everything?" Cora asked. $380,000 for the house, $140,000 in savings. That is it." Cora set the glass down. "That cannot be right. Did you not say he had a building or something? Downtown?" Linda looked up. "A building?" "He used to ask Paige about some building file, every Wednesday. You always changed the subject." Linda's face went still. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the drip of the faucet she had been meaning to fix for a year. "What building?" Linda said. Cora shrugged. "I do not know. I just heard him mention it." Linda picked up her phone and called the estate attorney's office. She demanded an earlier meeting. The receptionist said the soonest available was still Thursday. Linda said she would take it. She hung up and sat in the kitchen for a long time. The coffee in her mug went cold. The real estate appraiser's number, $380,000, was still on the back of the envelope, underlined twice. She had expected more. She had expected much more. And for the first time since my father died, I was not the one in the family who was afraid. I stayed at the Pinewood Motor Lodge for 5 nights. The room was $39 a night, and the mattress sagged in the middle, and the shower curtain had a mildew stain shaped roughly like the state of Ohio. It was fine. I had slept in worse places during college. Every morning, I woke up before 6 and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The neon sign outside the window, vacancy, always vacancy, cast a pink glow through the curtain that shifted each time a truck passed on the highway. In those moments, I did not think about money. I thought about my father, about the Saturday drives, about the calculator, about the way he raised his hand through the kitchen window the last time I saw him, not waving goodbye, just holding still. Grief does not care how much money you have. It shows up at 3 in the morning in a motel room that smells like bleach, and it sits on the edge of the bed, and it waits. On the 3rd morning, I called my attorney, Mitchell Hale. He was a 46-year-old estate and asset protection lawyer who spoke in paragraphs and wore ties that were always slightly crooked. I had retained him 2 years earlier when I first realized Linda was positioning herself around my father's finances. "I need you to confirm everything is current," I said. Mitchell pulled the files. He read the list back to me. The 6-story commercial building downtown, 100% in my name, transferred in stages between 2008 and 2020. The index fund, now valued at $4.2 million. The secondary real estate portfolio, diversified across 8 properties in 3 states, totaling $5.8 million. Cash reserves and brokerage accounts rounding out the balance. Total value under your name, as of Douglas's date of death, approximately $28 million, Mitchell said. None of it is part of his estate. None of it is subject to probate. None of it is Linda's to claim. "I know," I said. "I just needed to hear you say it. Are you expecting a challenge?" "From Linda?" "Yes." She will not win. I know that too. I hung up and sat on the edge of the motel bed. Outside, a semi-truck downshifted on the highway, and the pink neon sign flickered once and steadied. My father did not leave me money. He left me the roots. I grew the rest myself. I opened my laptop that night and reviewed the portfolio the way I did every quarter. Not because I needed to, because it was the only ritual I had left that still felt like a conversation with my father. The commercial building was the anchor. 6 floors, 32 tenants. Full occupancy for the 3rd consecutive year. My father had bought his first shares when the neighborhood was still zoned industrial, and the closest restaurant was a taco stand that operated out of a converted school bus. He used to drive me past it on Saturdays and say, "Someday, this block will be worth something." He was right. The building alone was valued at approximately $18 million. That number would have been unimaginable when he first bought in. But 25 years of appreciation, neighborhood redevelopment, and commercial lease rates had done what numbers always do when you leave them alone long enough. The index fund, the one he started with $5,000 when I was 16, had grown to $4.2 million. Most of that growth was compound returns, reinvested dividends, and my own contributions from my salary over the years. My father put in the first seed. I watered it every month like he taught me. Then there were the secondary holdings. Equity in 8 smaller commercial properties across 3 states, purchased through the fund's returns and reinvested rental income. $5.8 million. Nothing flashy. Nothing speculative. Just boring, patient, long-term accumulation. The kind of wealth that does not show up in a person's shoes or handbag. $28 million. Under the name Paige Irving. Not a single dollar was in Douglas Irving's estate. Linda was fighting over a house worth $380,000. She was fighting over savings of $140,000. She was changing locks and arranging chrysanthemums and rehearsing sentences about my house, while the person she had kicked out held a portfolio worth more than 50 times the property she was so desperate to claim. I closed the laptop. The motel room was dark, except for the blue glow of the screen fading from the ceiling. Outside, a car pulled into the lot, headlights sweeping across the curtain, then cutting off. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel righteous. I felt tired, and I missed my father, and I wanted to call him and tell him the numbers, the way I had every quarter for 18 years. But some calls cannot be made. Linda called me on a Monday evening, 4 days before the will reading. It was the first time she had dialed my number since the night she told me to pack my bags. Paige. Her voice was sweet, controlled. The same voice she used when company was over and she needed me to clear the dessert plates. "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Your father, did he ever mention a building? Something downtown?" Cora said he used to bring it up at dinner. "A building," I said. "Yes, some kind of commercial property. I have been going through his papers and I cannot find anything about it. I think everything will be clarified at the reading on Thursday." Silence. Then, "Paige, I was his wife for 22 years. I have a right to know what he owned." "Then the attorney will explain it." "I do not want to wait until Thursday. I want to know now." "I understand." "Are you going to tell me?" "I think Thursday is the right time." She hung up. Then she called back. I did not answer. She called again. And again. 3 calls in 7 minutes. I set the phone face down on the motel nightstand and listened to it vibrate against the wood. 3 short buzzes each time until it stopped. If you have ever sat across from someone who only calls when they need something, you know the tone. It is sweeter than any voice they have ever used with you before. It arrives without an apology for the last thing they said. It skips over the part where they kicked you out of your own home on the night your father died and lands directly on the part where they need information. Linda did not call to see how I was doing. She did not call to say she was sorry about the locks or the duffel bag or the 3 chairs at the funeral. She called because she had found a number that did not add up, and I was the only variable she had not accounted for. I turned off the phone and lay in the dark. The mattress sagged. The neon sign blinked. And somewhere, in a house 4 miles away, a woman was sitting at a kitchen table, realizing for the first time that the person she had dismissed for 22 years might be the most important person in the room. She just did not know how important yet. Maggie called me on Tuesday morning. She did not say hello. She said, "Linda withdrew $80,000 from the joint savings account yesterday." I sat up in bed. How? She used the financial power of attorney Douglas signed last spring, walked into the branch with the document and a death certificate, and requested a cashier's check. The power of attorney is not valid anymore. It terminates when the principal dies. I know that. You know that. Apparently, the teller did not. I called Mitchell within the hour. He confirmed it. The transaction had posted $80,000, withdrawn from a joint account using a power of attorney that had legally expired the moment Douglas's heart stopped. "The withdrawal is contestable," Mitchell said. "A POA ceases at death under state law. The bank may share liability for honoring it, but more immediately, it tells us something about Linda's mindset." What does it tell us? She is panicking. She is grabbing what she can reach, because she suspects there is something she cannot reach. I asked him to pull the transaction records. He did. 80,000 out. The funeral had cost approximately 8,000. The service, the casket, the plot, the flowers. That left 72,000 unaccounted for. Where did the rest go? I asked. I will have the bank trace the cashier's check, but my guess is it went into a personal account Linda opened recently. Print everything. Bring it Thursday. Already done. I hung up and sat at the small motel desk, the one with the laminate top that was peeling at the corner. The printer in Mitchell's office was probably running right now. Transaction statements, POA expiration dates, state statute citations. Each page another brick in a wall that Linda did not know was being built around her. She had taken the money because she was scared. I understood that. Fear makes people do things that logic cannot explain. But understanding something is not the same as excusing it, and $80,000 withdrawn from a dead man's account using an expired legal document is not fear. It is theft dressed up in black clothing and pearl earrings. The will reading was in 4 days. Linda had no idea that every dollar she moved was being documented. Every transaction, every timestamp, every signature she had no legal right to make. I set my phone on the nightstand and turned it off again. Thursday would come soon enough. The law office of Harlan Beckett was on the second floor of a brick building on Main Street, above a dentist's office and across from a bakery that smelled like cinnamon rolls every morning at 7. The staircase was narrow, the banister was wooden, and the carpet on the landing had been replaced so many times that the color no longer matched the walls. Harlan's conference room had a long oval table made of dark wood, 8 chairs upholstered in green leather, and a window that overlooked the parking lot. On the wall behind his chair hung a framed law degree from a state university and a clock with Roman numerals that ticked louder than it should have. Linda arrived first. She wore a black blazer, pressed slacks, and the same pearl earrings from the funeral. Cora followed behind her in a gray cardigan, clutching a small handbag. They sat at the head of the table as though the seating chart had already been decided. Maggie came next. She wore a navy blue dress she had probably owned for 20 years and a pair of flat shoes that made no sound on the carpet. She sat halfway down the table and folded her hands. 2 of my father's cousins arrived together, Arthur and Dean, both in their 60s, both wearing ties that were slightly too short. They nodded at Linda, nodded at Maggie, and took seats near the window. I was the last to walk in. Mitchell was beside me, carrying a leather briefcase with brass clasps. He wore a gray suit and a tie that was, as always, slightly crooked. Linda's eyes locked onto Mitchell immediately. "Who is this?" she said. "My attorney," I said. "Why do you need an attorney?" "Because I am also a beneficiary." Linda smiled, the kind of smile that does not reach past the lips. "Paige, the will is very simple. There is no need for drama." Harlan cleared his throat. He was a tall man with white hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He opened a folder on the table and said, "Before we begin reading the will, I need to explain the structure of Douglas Irving's estate." He said, Structure the way an architect might say, foundation, carefully, and with the implication that what came next depended entirely on understanding this part first. Linda sat at the head of the table as if she had already won. Harlan read the will slowly. He was the kind of attorney who believed that legal documents should be heard, not skimmed, and he gave each sentence the weight of a closing argument. To my wife, Linda Graves Irving, I leave the family residence located at 47 Birchwood Lane, free and clear of any lien or encumbrance. I also leave the remaining balance of our joint savings account. Linda nodded. She pressed her hand flat on the table. To my stepdaughter, Cora Graves, I leave the sum of $20,000 from the education fund established in 2019. Cora blinked. 20,000. She looked at her mother. Linda's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. That is the entirety of Douglas Irving's probate estate, Harlan said. The room waited. Arthur and Dean exchanged a look. Maggie did not move. Linda leaned forward. The house and the savings. That is what I expected. However, Harlan continued, adjusting his glasses, I am obligated to inform all parties that the probate estate represents only a portion of the assets Douglas Irving accumulated during his lifetime. Linda's hand stopped moving on the table. Over the course of approximately 18 years, Douglas Irving executed a series of legal asset transfers. These transfers were completed during his lifetime, with full legal documentation, tax filings, and notarized instruments. The assets in question are not part of his probate estate, and are therefore not subject to distribution under this will. Linda's voice came out flat. Transfers. To whom? Harlan removed his glasses. He looked at me. The clock on the wall ticked 3 times before he spoke. To his daughter, Paige Irving. The silence that followed was not the kind that feels empty. It was the kind that feels full. The air packed tight with things people wanted to say, but could not find the words for. Linda stood up. The legs of her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. The sound cut across the room like a match striking. What transfers? She said. I am his wife. I have been his wife for 22 years. What are you talking about? Harlan looked at Linda with the patient expression of a man who had delivered unexpected news before and knew that the next 3 minutes would determine everything. Perhaps Mr. Hale can provide the specifics, he said, and gestured toward Mitchell. Mitchell stood. He opened the brass clasps on his briefcase with 2 precise clicks that echoed in the silent room. From inside, he removed 3 folders, each one tabbed, labeled, and organized with the kind of precision that only a lawyer billing by the hour can justify. He placed the first folder on the table. This is the deed of ownership for a 6-story commercial building located downtown. The property was originally purchased by Douglas Irving in 1999. Between 2008 and 2020, ownership was transferred in stages to Paige Irving through a series of legally executed gift transfers. Each transfer was filed with the county recorder, accompanied by gift tax returns, and notarized. He opened the second folder. This is the summary statement for an investment portfolio held in the name of Paige Irving since 2008. The portfolio includes index funds, dividend reinvestment accounts, and equity in 8 additional commercial properties across 3 states. He opened the third folder. This is a consolidated asset valuation, prepared by a certified public accountant, dated as of the week of Douglas Irving's death. Mitchell set his hand on the third folder and looked at the room. The total value of assets held under the name Paige Irving as of that date is approximately $28 million. Nobody moved. Cora's mouth opened. She pressed both hands flat on the table, as if the number had tilted the room. Arthur leaned back in his chair. Dean removed his glasses and set them on the table. Maggie, who had known, simply nodded once and folded her hands tighter. Linda did not sit down. She stood at the head of the table with her fingers gripping the edge, her knuckles turning white against the dark wood. No, she said. No, that is his money. She stole it. Mitchell did not raise his voice. Every transaction was executed by Douglas Irving voluntarily, with independent legal counsel, over a period of 18 years. These are not estate assets. They are the personal property of Paige Irving. Linda turned to me. Her face was the color of the conference room walls. Flat, pale, stripped of the composure she had worn like armor since the funeral. "You knew," she said. "You sat in that house every Wednesday and ate my food, and you knew." I looked at her. "You kicked me out 4 hours after my father died. You changed the locks before his body was cold. You want to talk about what I knew?" The clock ticked. Nobody spoke. Mitchell was not finished. He reached into the briefcase one more time and removed a single sheet of paper. He placed it in the center of the table, face up, aligned with the edge. "There is one additional matter," he said. Linda was still standing. Her hands had not left the edge of the table. Cora had tears running down both cheeks but was making no sound. "On the 9th day following Douglas Irving's death," Mitchell continued, "a withdrawal of $80,000 was made from the joint savings account at First Regional Bank. The withdrawal was executed using a financial power of attorney signed by Douglas Irving in March of this year." Harlan looked up from his folder. He already knew where this was going. "Under state law," Mitchell said, "a power of attorney terminates automatically upon the death of the principal. Douglas Irving died on October 11th. The withdrawal was made on October 20th. The document used to authorize it was no longer valid." Linda's voice came out tight. "I needed that money for the funeral." Mitchell slid the paper closer to her. "The funeral expenses, as documented by the service provider, totaled $8,214. The withdrawal was $80,000. That leaves $71,786 unaccounted for." The room had the kind of quiet that happens when everyone is doing math in their head at the same time. Arthur looked at the ceiling. Dean looked at his shoes. Maggie looked at Linda with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not pity, but something closer to resignation. As if she had hoped, until this exact moment, that she was wrong about who Linda really was. Harlan spoke next. His voice was measured. "Linda, I would advise you to consult with independent counsel before making any further statements regarding that transaction." Cora whispered, "Mom." Just the one word. She said it the way someone says it when they are not asking a question, but making a request. "Please stop. Please sit down. Please tell me this is not what it looks like." Linda did not sit down. She did not speak. She stood at the head of the table with both hands still gripping the edge, and for the first time in 22 years, she had nothing left to say. Somewhere behind the wall, in the dentist's office below, a drill started up. The sound rose through the floor like a small, persistent alarm that nobody could turn off. Linda sat down. It was not graceful. She dropped into the chair like someone had cut the strings, and her hands fell into her lap, and she stared at the table. 22 years, she said. Her voice was smaller now. The command was gone from it. "I cooked for him. I cleaned for him. I drove him to every appointment. I sat in the hospital for 11 hours the night of his first stroke. I held his hand." Nobody answered. The clock ticked. "I did not have a career," she said. "I did not have savings before him. My first husband left me with a leased car and a maxed credit card and a daughter who was 18 months old. Douglas knew that. He knew what I came from. He promised me I would never go through that again." She looked at Harlan. "Does none of that matter?" Harlan said carefully. "The house is yours. The savings, minus the contested withdrawal, are part of the estate. Douglas did not leave you with nothing, Linda. He left me a house," she said, "and he gave her $28 million. He gave her those assets while he was alive," Harlan said. "They were his to give." Maggie spoke for the first time. She had been sitting quietly, hands folded, watching the room the way she watched everything, with patience and without commentary, until the right moment. "Douglas loved you, Linda," she said. "He married you because he loved you. But he also loved Paige. And he knew, we both knew, that you would never share willingly. So he made sure Paige was taken care of before it came to this." Linda looked at Maggie as though she had been slapped. "You knew?" "I knew because Douglas told me. Years ago. He said, 'Linda will never let Paige have anything unless it is already done.'" He was not being cruel. He was being honest. Cora pulled her chair closer to her mother. She put her hand on Linda's arm. Linda did not acknowledge it. "I did not know," Linda whispered. "I did not know any of this." And there it was. The truest sentence Linda had spoken in 22 years. She did not know because she had never asked. She did not know because she had never considered the possibility that the quiet girl who washed dishes and drove home every Wednesday might matter more than she assumed. The conference room clock struck the half-hour. No one moved to leave. I stood up. Everyone in the room looked at me. Linda with her hands in her lap. Cora with tears drying on her cheeks. Maggie with her steady gaze. Arthur and Dean with their slightly too short ties. Harlan behind his folder. Mitchell beside his briefcase. "I did not come here to take anything from anyone," I said. "Everything under my name has been mine for years. I came here so that everyone in this room would know the truth. Not part of it, all of it." I looked at Linda. She did not look away. "From today forward, I will not call. I will not visit. I will not explain. If you or Cora need to reach me, you can do it through Mitchell." I picked up my bag from the floor beside my chair. I turned to Maggie. "Thank you, Aunt Maggie." She nodded. She did not need more than that. We had always understood each other in the same shorthand my father used. A nod, a squeeze, a lifted palm. I walked toward the door. My shoes sounded on the hardwood. A steady rhythm, even and unhurried. I did not look back. At the threshold, I stopped. I turned, not all the way, just enough to see Linda's profile at the head of the table. "You said the house is yours," I said. "Then keep it." "I do not need it." I never did. I closed the door behind me. Not a slam, not a gentle pull, a firm close, the way my father taught me to close a deal. Quiet, deliberate, and final. In the hallway, the carpet was worn thin in front of the elevator. Mitchell fell into step beside me. He did not speak. He knew that some moments do not require commentary. The elevator was broken. We took the stairs. At the landing, Arthur and Dean caught up with us. Arthur extended his hand. "Your father would have been proud of you," he said. I shook it. "He would have told me to check the portfolio before driving home." Arthur almost laughed. Dean nodded. They walked to their car, and I walked to mine, and the cinnamon roll smell from the bakery across the street followed me down the sidewalk like something warm and ordinary, and completely unrelated to any of what had just happened upstairs. That was fine. Ordinary was fine. I sat in the car for a long time. The parking lot behind the law office was nearly empty. Mitchell had left. Arthur and Dean had left. Inside the building, I assumed Linda and Cora were still in the conference room, still absorbing, still recalibrating the shape of their lives. I put my hands on the steering wheel and stared through the windshield at the brick wall across the lot. There was a drain pipe running down the side of the building with a rust stain shaped like a question mark. I stared at it until my vision blurred, and then I cried. Not for the money, not for Linda. Not for the 22 years of 3-place settings and missing Christmas cards and a yoga mat where my bed used to be. I cried for my father. Because he had known. He had known this day would come. The day Linda would change the locks. The day she would stand in the hallway and say, "Pack your bags." The day the will would be read and the numbers would speak for themselves. He had seen it years ago, the way he saw undervalued properties and market corrections, and he had prepared for it the only way he knew how. Not with words, with numbers, with documents, with 18 years of quiet transfers, each one a small act of love disguised as paperwork. He could not stop Linda from being who she was. He loved her in his way, and he had chosen to stay with her, and I understood that choice even if I could not fully forgive it. But he had made sure that when the day came, and he knew it would come, I would be standing on ground that no one could take from me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I started the car. On the way home, I drove past the building. My building. 6 stories of glass and brick, with a small brass plaque near the entrance that read, "Irving Commercial." I had not changed the name. I did not plan to. I pulled over and sat with the engine idling, looking up at the windows on the fourth floor where the lights were still on. Some tenant working late, unaware that the woman in the car below owned the ceiling above their head. He was right. I was never caught off guard. But I would have traded every dollar in that portfolio to hear him say, "Good job," one more time. 3 weeks after the reading, Linda hired a lawyer. His name was Brennan, and he specialized in estate contests. He reviewed every document Mitchell had presented, the deeds, the tax filings, the notarized gift transfers, the portfolio statements, and called Linda back within a week. "There is no basis for a challenge," he told her. "The transfers were executed over 18 years by a competent adult with independent legal counsel. There is no evidence of undue influence, coercion, or diminished capacity." Douglas Irving knew exactly what he was doing, Linda argued. She said she had not been informed. Brennan said the law did not require a spouse to be informed of gifts made from individually owned assets. Douglas's separate property was his to give. The building had been purchased before the marriage. The investment fund had been established with separate funds. Every subsequent contribution had been traceable to his own earnings, not community property. "Your husband was generous to you," Brennan told her. "He left you the family home, free and clear. He left you the savings. He did not leave you with nothing." "He left me with nothing compared to what he gave her," Linda said. Brennan did not respond to that. The $80,000 was a separate matter. Mitchell sent a formal letter requesting the return of the $72,000 that exceeded the funeral costs. Linda's attorney advised her to comply. She did. The check arrived at Mitchell's office within 10 days, drawn from a personal account Linda had opened the day after the withdrawal. Cora sent me a text message 3 days later. It was the first direct communication I had ever received from her. It said, "I did not know what she was going to do that night. I am sorry." I read it. I read it twice. I did not reply. Not because I was angry, but because I did not know what to say to someone who had watched me walk down a staircase with a duffel bag and had not said a single word. The family shifted. Arthur and Dean called me. Neighbors who had attended the funeral reached out. The narrative Linda had built. Paige is absent. Paige does not care. Paige is too busy. Collapsed under the weight of the numbers Mitchell had placed on that conference table. Linda, for the first time in 22 years, found herself on the outside of the family she had spent so long controlling. The isolation she had built for me had come home. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever had someone in your family treat you like you were invisible until they needed something from you, you know exactly what this felt like. Not the money part. The part where they only see you when it costs them nothing. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment. Tell me, did you ever walk away from someone who only loved you on their terms? And while you are here, please subscribe. It means more than you know. 6 months later, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a building that overlooked a public park. It was not extravagant. It had hardwood floors that creaked near the bathroom door, a kitchen with enough counter space to cook a real meal, and 2 windows in the living room that faced east. So the morning light came in warm and direct and landed on the spot where I put my desk. I opened my own consulting firm that spring. I called it Irving Compliance Group. The name was not an accident. It was not a tribute in the sentimental sense. My father would have hated sentimentality. It was a statement of origin. Everything I knew about numbers, about patience, about reading a ledger the way some people read poetry, it started with him. Maggie came for dinner once a month. She brought bread from the bakery near her house and a bottle of wine she swore was on sale but never actually was. We ate at the small table by the window and talked about Douglas, not with sadness, but with the particular kind of warmth that comes from knowing someone exactly as they were, without revision. He used to say you were the only person in the family who understood interest rates, Maggie told me one evening, cutting a slice of sourdough. He used to say that about everyone he liked, I said. She smiled. No, just you. I kept one thing from the old house. Not the house itself. Not the furniture. Not the photographs Linda had curated so carefully over the years. I kept the calculator. It sat on my desk beside my laptop, A 30-year-old pocket calculator with a cracked plastic case, yellowed buttons, and a display that flickered when you pressed the equals sign too hard. It was the same one my father had handed me the summer I was 16, in his office, with the desk lamp humming and the AM radio murmuring behind us. Linda did not call. I did not expect her to. Cora had sent one more letter, handwritten, on stationery I did not recognize. She wrote about her job search, about the house feeling different now, about how she wished things had been different. I read it. I set it on the kitchen counter and let it sit there for a week. Then I put it in a drawer. I was not ready to reply, and I had learned, finally, that not being ready was not the same as not caring. I was sitting at my desk on a Tuesday morning when I picked up the calculator. It was heavier than it looked. The plastic was warm from the sunlight coming through the window, and the buttons had the soft resistance of something that has been pressed 10,000 times and expects to be pressed 10,000 more. The brand name on the bottom had worn off years ago. The battery compartment had a piece of tape holding it shut, the same piece my father had put there when I was 17, and the latch broke during a Saturday drive. I turned it on. The screen lit up. A faint gray-green glow, the numbers slightly uneven, the decimal point brighter than the digits. It still worked. Of course it still worked. My father did not buy things that stopped working. I typed in the number, 2, 8, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 28 million. I looked at it for a long time. The screen held the number without judgment, without commentary, without applause. It was just math. The same way it had always been just math. On those Saturday drives, in the office with the desk lamp, on the quarterly calls, in the motel room at 3 a.m. My father had said once, sitting in his truck outside a colonial with a cracked driveway, "Money does not fix everything, but knowing how to count it means you will never be caught off guard." He was right. I was never caught off guard, not by Linda, not by the locks, not by the 3 chairs, not by any of it. But I would have traded every dollar on that screen to hear him say it one more time. I turned the calculator off. The screen went dark. I set it back on the desk, next to the laptop, where it had been every day since I moved in. Then I picked up my coffee, opened my email, and started the day. Outside, the park was filling with joggers and dog walkers, and a woman pushing a stroller through the fallen leaves. The sun was still coming through the east window. The floor creaked near the bathroom door. The bread Maggie had brought on Sunday was still on the counter, wrapped in a cloth napkin, and there was enough left for toast. This was my life. I had built it, and it was enough. My name is Paige Irving, and that is my story. My father did not leave me money. He left me the one thing money cannot buy, the ability to never need anyone's permission to exist. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. There are more stories like mine in the description below. I will see you in the next one.